A silent sky train moves through a darkening city. Its elevated tracks moving past residential areas and toward the Suko warehouse district on the outskirts of Alki. As the camera moves riding alongside the train, the automatic announcements of the next stop flows through a slightly opened window. Auto announcement: next stop Suko district stop 4. Next stop Suko district stop 4. If this is your stop, please prepare to disembark. The train lightly shudders as it rounds the last hill that separates the warehouse district from Alki's main airport. The light shutter shifts a young girl who has fallen asleep on the train. The camera moves into showing the girl muttering to herself as she shifts the bags she is carrying. A faint click releases the silver bracelet on her right wrist, but luckily for her the bracelet has a small chain that keeps it from falling off. The train shudders again, this time nearly dislodging her bag from her lap. The young girl of 15 years fumbles with the bag, managing to keep it from falling as she awakens. Looking around as she rubs at her eyes, Flight realizes two things in the next instant. One, she's fallen asleep on the sky train and missed her stop, but worse, she is now 13 stops from her home in the Suko district, at night. Flight, what? What? Shooting up from her seat, she presses her face into the train's glass window, staring out in horror. Panicking, she pulls back, looking around at the few other passengers all eyeing her while pretending not to. Oh my god. Oh my god, my mom's going to kill me. Why didn't someone wake me up? She shouts. A few of the passengers give her indignant looks before going back to pretending not to care. Passenger young man, he thinks. Yeah, like that's my job. Passenger businesswoman, she thinks. If only that was my biggest worry. Damn, SCC always on my butt about something. Flight, catching this looks, Flight goes back to panicking. I knew I shouldn't have stayed late. Now look, I'm miles from home in the Suko district. She shudders, thinking of all the horrible things that could happen to her here, completely missing the warning that the train was stopping. He reaches out to wave and get her attention, but he's scared to touch her as she is muttering something about horrid old lectures. Suddenly the train pulls to a stop. Flight's eyes open dramatically before she starts to fly forward. Catching her balance, Flight has a moment of relief before the train settles and her arms, which had been spread out to help balance, are suddenly flung forward as she is thrown backward. The bracelet on her right wrist, closest to the hand pole, catches on a rounded metal loop, snapping the bracelet's chain. Flight falls to the floor with a thud, and instantly the few other passengers are there to help her. As she sits up groaning and rubbing her head, the doors hiss open. Passenger older man: so sorry miss, I tried to warn you. Passenger businesswoman: she should know better than to stand on the train without holding on to a handrail. Now sit still. The woman fusses over her as Flight thinks. Flight, my head and butt are already yelling at me. Thanks very much. As she lowers her head, a flash of silver that should have been on her wrist snatches her attention as it rolls toward the open door, the chain throwing off its direction just enough to sending it curving toward the doors, where a slight gap between the ledge and the landing platform lay. No. Jerking forward, Flight tries to reach the bracelet. Pulling in a breath, she watches as the bracelet hits the thin lip of the sliding door and hops over the gap. Sighing in relief, she continues forward, only to watch the weight of the chain tilt the bracelet back toward the edge where it falls between the gap. Scurrying forward, she hopes to grab it somehow, but it is too late. Flight, no. But the train continue on its auto-programmed route. Flight ignores the suspicious stare of the last passenger on the sky train platform, thankful that it was not one of the passengers who had seen the entire bracelet losing episode. She waits for the platform to clear so she doesn't get reprimanded again, while thinking. Flight, hopefully he won't recognize my uniform and call the school. She imagines the type of scowling she'd get from her teachers. Flight, the platform finally clears, she steadies herself. Now let's get this done. Though she put on a brave face, her mind runs to all the bad things that could happen to her here. No, no, no. She shakes her head as she climbs down. As she lands lightly on the crushed rocks around the tracks, a flash of shadow cutting off the light between her and the light post high above the landing. She casts her eyes upward nervously before a sound from behind her has her whirling to look. Did he come back? She thinks of the last passenger. Flight, is there anyone? Voice 1, don't you know never to ask that? A strong male voice calls. She turned back to see a young man looking to be in his middle 20s, his eyes hidden by the fringes of wild, dirty blonde hair. Flight, who? Voice 2, that's right, the element of surprise is important to both prey and predator. This voice came from behind. She turns, trying to keep both men in sight. He has a mostly shaved head, sleeveless red shirt showing off his well-developed muscles. Voice 1, losing the element of surprise can be bad for the predator, as it mean he may lose his meal. Voice 2, but that's okay because the predator can always stalk new prey. Voice 1, but for the prey losing the element of surprise? He raises his head, letting the light cast itself into reflective red eyes like those of a wild animal. Voice 2, Flight's head swing back to the second male, her blood running cold and her heart pounding so fast that she barely hears, but the comprehension is clear. Death. The hint of light off two long teeth, and she feels her body go numb with fear. Voice 1, wouldn't you agree? She tries to turn her head, but before she can, warm breath passes over her neck. Prey. The warm breath thaws her chilling soul, and she reacts instantly to the threat, throwing her body forward to distance herself while clumsily spinning to face the wild hair attacker. The first male chuckled as the second darts after her, his suddenly too long arm reaching for her. Flight gasps, her steps faltering as she steps back into thin air. The second male's long clawed hand wrapped around Flight's left wrist, pulling her toward him before throwing her away with a yelp. The hiss of burning skin filled the air. Voice 1. What happened? Voice 2. Shaved head attacker's growling, his face pulled more predominantly into a muzzle as he finishes the change into an anthropomorphic werewolf. Silver. She has a silver bracelet. They both turn, staring down at the fallen body sprawled on her side. She stirs, turning off of her side to look up at the two. Flight. Monsters. She mutters, trying to get her glazed-over eyes to focus and her head to stop spinning. Voice 1. Doesn't matter, just don't touch it again. Voice 2. Too bad, Prey, you would need more silver than that. As they advance slowly, the panic more than pain holds her in place. Flight. She thinking. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Shaking her already pounding head, she screamed. No.